Hey folks, it is October the 27th, and we're going to discuss a bit more about models of competition. And if you recall last time, we were talking about monopolistic versus perfect competition. And please keep in mind that a lot of this has to do with the theory of competition, and reality doesn't always quite match up to this. So the notes are, of course, posted in the Google Classroom and all that good stuff. So moving right along. So oligopoly. So I believe this is our third model of competition. And oligopoly is a market dominated by few large profitable firms.
Technology.
So if you think about back to your Greek history, you had oligarchy, such as the ancient Spartans, and that's the rule of the few, or the power of the few. So here we have the same thing, only it has to do with economics. So you find this throughout many countries, especially with command economies, where you have you can have a command economy, kind of like China, right? So it's largely communist. However, there are some companies that are allowed to be strongly state controlled, but still bring in profits. But you're only allowed to have a few of these companies because they have to be state controlled. So that's a good example as far as my mind goes. Yeah.
And the technology firm, like, technically we only use, America itself only uses like a few big tech companies.
Yeah, like we discussed that last time. Yeah, like Google,
Apple, Samsung.
Oh, so you're. Oh, I see. Yeah. I mean, well, think about too, like.
I actually.
Nowadays there are.
It's really good.
There are like, it's like tech is like a big part, but that tech can be like categorized different things. But each of those things has its own giant.
Firstly, I think it's a sign of a new burgeoning market. I mean, think about, I think of the oil boom. In the oil boom, you had all these guys go out and dig up their own spots of oil and strike it rich. But eventually, it becomes more of a monopoly, kind of like this, where very few own, and it becomes a single monopoly. And I mean, the same is with tech. Like when the internet first hit it big, there were so many mom and pop websites that were hitting it pretty big, right? There was a lot of people who literally out of their own home servers were getting rich, like in the early 2000s. But nowadays, yeah, it's pretty much controlled just by a few companies, and they're more like an oligopoly or even monopolies. So
The mining, I was reading a history book over this. There was the mining towns back in 1850s. It explains how they would actually avoid monopolies by actually setting a limit on how many claims you can have in a certain area.
Okay, yeah.
And it wasn't like a state controlled, it was like a people's controlled thing.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, and that way everybody gets a chance and things like that. Sure thing. Are you a hostage?
No, I just
Okay.
I was just
Okay. See, now I have to start checking people for weapons. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, here we go.
Good luck out there. Be safe. All right. So that's a good definition for it. So how do oligopolies work? So what is collusion? An agreement among members of an oligopoly to set prices and productions at certain levels. Russia has been accused of this because it's one of the funny things about Russia is after the fall of the Soviet Union, they became a federation that was more democratic in many ways, at least as far as their constitution was set. It looked a lot more like Europe. But a lot of the people who were in charge of the new government after the fall of communism were the same guys who were in charge during communism. So in many ways, the form changed, but the reality of the people in charge didn't. Yeah, so it's still the same people. Well, the same happened for their businesses. These oligopolies or this oligarchy was it helped set up the same strong companies and manufacturers that was in charge of most of the production during the Soviet era was still in charge during the Russian Federation, except now they're reaping in profits. So it's the same thing there. Some companies are allowed to profit, others aren't. Like Putin has been very famous for like throwing Russian billionaires in prison because they're too competitive with some of the oligarchies in Russia. So there's an example there. Yes, sir, Mike.
It's also, that kind of reminds me of what happened right before China became the People's Republic. Right before it actually happened, there was like the dynasty was like shut down, new dynasty came in. The thing was, it was the same exact people in charge.
Yeah.
They just changed the name.
Well, that often happens in revolutions too. Like they eventually get rid of all the people, like say like you're talking about China. When Mao took over China, he just didn't wipe out all the professors and factory owners at once. He had to bring in good communists to learn how to do those things first, and then he got rid of them. So he made it sound like they're going to be integrated part of the new government, that they get to own their property, that they'd be good friends. But within 5 years, once they had all the knowledge they needed from them, they wound up sending them to the prison camps and stuff like that. So, all right, so happy things. All right, price fixing. An agreement among firms to sell at the same or similar prices. Both are illegal in the U.S. So, collusion. Collusion is something that used to happen whenever you would have trust back in the old days, like say before and during Teddy Roosevelt. He was known as a big trust buster. Trust are pretty much like that. You have the biggest companies within a country, and they agree to control the whole market. Cartels. Hey, there we go. We've heard about those before. An association by producers established to coordinate prices and production. So, examples are, this is an international one, OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. They're largely Middle Eastern countries, so there are some South American countries involved in this as well. And I think Russia and some Eastern European countries are part of it. Controls the oil supply and manipulates prices of gasoline. OPEC has had a lot of power over oil and gas prices. In fact, during the end of the 70s, they were able to basically cut off a great, I don't know how much, but a lot of the supply of fuel to the United States, leading to gas shortages, gas prices rising, all because they were protesting a couple of things. They were protesting U.S. involvement in Iran, but also we were trying to exert pressure to try to stabilize the problems between Palestine and Israel.
I watched a documentary over OPEC, the OPEC thing, and whenever it was a big thing in Dubai and all that, a lot of like the people just being a citizen of certain countries over there, you would get a paycheck. Very big.
That's true. But the thing is, some of those countries, like only like 10 to 5% of the population there is actually considered a citizen.
Yeah.
Everybody else is considered like a migrant worker, and they have no rights. So
And
it's
the
pretty
thing
lame.
was, America got tired of them controlling the oil business, so they actually, during the Persian Gulf War, a little bit late, Persian Gulf War, they blew up a lot of oil refineries and factories, and a lot of oil fields.
Well, that's one of the reasons why here in America, some people want to become more independent, be independent for them, because OPEC, once again, just recently, I'll get you in a second, during the COVID shutdown, OPEC played with the price of petroleum and helped lead to some of the oil market shutdown, like say here in Texas and all that. So they were partially responsible for that, then plus COVID. So, and they think the reason they did it was to actually weaken the U.S. market because they saw we were already shut down due to COVID. So yes.
Okay, so hypothetically speaking, this isn't practical due to many reasons, but
Okay.
if a, let's say, hotel chain wanted to buy up every hotel in the city
Yeah.
and was offering money to do so, would that fall under any kind of monopoly laws? Because
Well,
like they're
the
not
thing
forcing
is-
the thing, they're just flat out paying.
Yeah, especially since it's in such a small region, I can't say I know, because let's say if there's only 2 burger joints in town, they're both McDonald's. Are you gonna have them shut down as a monopoly? I don't think so.
I mean, like,
I
if
think
you're
it
like
takes a bigger
the city of
scale.
New York or something.
I don't know. When you have a scale and size that big, you might start getting into that realm. Especially if you do show signs that somehow what they're doing is to be able to shut others out, then you might get it. Because you can do benign things for non-benign reasons, right? So like, hey, they're trying to sell their business. I'm offering them a lot of money for it. We're both winning. But it's remember, it goes back kind of like to those unseen forces. So when we're talking about the unseen things in the economy, that's what we're worried about with monopolies. I don't really talk about that in American economics anymore. But it's one of the reasons why we have anti-monopoly laws. It's because we know that it stops people from investing. Yes, absolutely. Wash your hands, buddy. All right, so De Beers controls 80% of the world's diamonds. Keeps the prices high by limiting supply. Diamonds are actually quite, they're quite common and they're easy to make artificially. So they're useful for a lot of tools. I think we've talked about diamonds before. All right. Next one, market power. The ability of a company to control prices and output. Markets dominated by one or a few firms, monopoly or oligopoly, have higher prices and lower output. Great market power. So they have a lot of power in the market. They have a lot of control. They can't control the demand, but they can control the supply and the price, which is almost universal power, at least over the economy. Markets with many sellers, as we talked about earlier, have lower prices and higher output, but they don't have a lot of power in shaping the market. Like there's like a million, coffee mug companies out there. If one of them wants to jack up their prices, it's not going to affect the whole economy. All right, predatory pricing, setting the market price below cost levels for short term to drive out competition.
That's illegal.
It is illegal, but it does still happen because this is one of those things that's harder to catch sometimes.
Just because it's illegal doesn't mean we're not gonna do it.
Exactly.
All right. So I'm going to keep my eyes on you. All right. Firms in monopolistic and perfect competition do this to gain market power. So this is one of the few things that they can do. So it's like, look, remember we're talking about the old farmers market. So you're able to take the cost or loss of profit. So you sell your eggs for half the price of the guy next to you until he goes home and quits. So, example, my pizza shop sells slices for 50 cents each. Even though it costs me 75 cents to make it, I'm losing 25 cents, but it drives the competition out of business. So I can raise the price later. So this can happen in like small settings, right? Yeah, but like you mentioned, if this happens in like a larger setting, it can get caught. Kind of like with the hotel idea. If it's a small town, nothing's going to happen. But if it's a big area, you're going to have some laws against you.
Isn't that allowed if you're doing like a mass coupon sale type thing across your entire chain?
Well, that's a good point because you see that often. And yeah, all a coupon does is it's a voucher saying that the company is going to pay the vendor a certain amount of money and they're going to recoup the loss for it. And so, yeah, the producer is the one who's going to lose out on the profit. It does happen all the time. It really does. I think what you could do, though, is they can make the argument that they're not trying to drive out the competition, but they're trying to get rid of excess goods, right? It's like, hey, we got too much, and we're wanting to get the market back to the way it's supposed to be. So, it's one of those things you like. That's how do you prove it? I mean, really, that's where attorneys come in, and for right or wrong, they can come up with what they think the motives are. All right, government and competition. Governments keep firms from controlling prices and supply of important goods. Antitrust laws. So going back to the old days, the progressive era in America, we're talking about Teddy Roosevelt and Howard Taft. Antitrust laws are laws that encourage competition and break up monopolies and oligopolies in the marketplace. So you got about 120 years ago, we had a big to-do about all this. It's a shame. There you go.
Now, what are some antitrust laws?
Anti what?
You gotta ask me that. Let me think. Actually, like the biggest ones that were done by like Teddy Roosevelt were actually instituted way before he was president. In like the 1880s, I forgot the name of it,
Yeah,
but it didn't have a lot of enforcement power, but they're gonna add enforcement power later on when Teddy Roosevelt's president. And I don't quite remember off the top of my head right now.
He actually
Is it Sherman?
got rid of child labor and also grew up police force, and also he fixed the monopoly, just being the mayor of New York.
Yeah, he did that. I mean, like within that setting, but of course, the cities. That's the thing about like the progressives, kind of like today, are always like a very city-based thing, right? And so like the more countryside-based thing was, of course, Leslie, Mark, y'all okay? Hey, Mark, can you totally take that off your face? That is creeping me out. There you go. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, we don't need to like make our mask into sleep masks. All right. So antitrust laws. So 4 forms of antitrust laws. So you have regulating business practices. Government can intervene if a firm has too much market power. The breaking up of monopolies. Antitrust laws have been used to break up monopolies in the past. Standard Oil, AT&T. Some people, as we have discussed, have talked about doing that with the Google. So we'll see about that one.
It's still in process.
I don't know. I think it would take.
It's gonna take a few years, but
Well, the thing is about Google is it's one of those things that you have people on both sides of the aisle who want to defend Google and people on both sides of the aisle who want to break it up. So I don't know. It would kind of depend how you get it. It's because
there's two sides to it. There's people
like
that are saying
Republicans and
it's a
Democrats.
much better product.
Yeah.
That's the why it has such market domination. Number two, it buys out all its competition and it just doesn't allow anybody else to do search engine. Those are the two camps right now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, like over here, like censorship's one of the things they wanted to break apart. But another thing is it reduces competition. But the thing is it's some people defend it because the censorship is coming from what's considered a private business and not the government. And that's allowable under the Constitution. However, Google receives so many subsidies and protections under the law that it almost acts like a branch of the government or like a part of the government. Therefore, its censor does have government power and is limited by the Constitution. So it's like, it's really sticky. It's really sticky. I can't see it lasting too long. That could be wrong. I don't know.
Another one, which has been going on for a while, but nobody's really said anything. Only a few people really said anything. Nobody cared. Fun fact: Disney has been extending copyright law since the 50s. Mickey Mouse is supposed to die like almost 70 years ago when it opened to the public domain. But they kept on extending it, and been extending it to this day.
Well, they keep opening up new cartoons and stuff, like new series and stuff, basically. So, yeah, Mickey Mouse has got a lot of cash though. A lot of cash. Now, we're going to go over this a little bit more, but then I'm going to give you a little bit of time to finish. Actually, we just got 2 more to go through. After we're done with these, I'm going to give you a little bit of time to finish your paper that's due today. So, yes, if you're already finished, you can use the time to study hall. All right. So second to last one, antitrust laws continue. So we have blocking mergers. A merger is a combination of two or more companies into one firm. The government can block this if it decreases competition. So this happens a lot of times with the entertainment industry, or you'll have like Disney, for example, has done a lot of mergers, like merging with other. Yeah.
Fox, Lucasfilms.
Yes, like Lucasfilms was a big one, you're right. And Fox, they bought them up. So that's a big part of the entertainment market that has to do with movies and channels that all of a sudden is part of their conglomerate. Yes.
How does that fall under like two companies that don't merger, but basically same company, two names?
Same like what?
Like, let's say you have two companies that just reduce like any kind of sales price at all to those two companies, and it's like, oh, you give me goods, I give you goods, we share
Yeah.
profit. But it's just at that point, it just becomes one company with two different names.
I think that would be a merger in fact, if not in name then.
What
It
is the
sounds
deal?
like that.
I do have one question.
Mhm.
What is the deal with Super Foods and Berkshires? We practice the same thing.
Yeah, it's all under the Berkshire's company,
I know that they're the same company.
but I'm not sure where the branching came up. It might have to do with a bit to do with like the market style, because like one's a little bit more like kind of like dressed up than the other, I think. I don't know. I'm not really sure to tell you the truth. But I mean, these things happen. So the government can block this if it decreases competition. So the mergers have been blocked in the past. I'm trying to think of one right now. Usually when I hear of a merger, I usually think of like big tech firm, or I think of like TV channels and stuff. All right, so
You got
preserving
Fox,
incentives. Yeah, we mentioned that.
ABC and another one, I'm guessing.
Gosh, there was like I could like if I think about it long enough, there's a few more that are like on the tip of my tongue. But all right, so preserving incentives. In 1997, new guidelines on mergers were introduced, allowing companies to merge if they show benefits to consumers. So I guess they're okay in some cases. Trying to, what would that be about? I don't know. Hey, let's go to the last one.
Hold on.
Go right down. Blocking mergers, preserving incentives. I want to make sure y'all have plenty of time to finish if you need to. I was hoping to give you 30 minutes. Last one. Sorry, bud. Deregulation. I'll go back. The removal of some government controls over a market. It is used to promote competition. So deregulation is one of those things that it's one of those things that's often usually used to help people win office, but it's rarely ever done, like say on a federal level. So deregulation allows more competition in the market, lowers prices, and increases variety, but can often lead to layoffs and business closures in short term because of changes. Of course, the same can happen during regulation. Like let's say if you regulate a certain kind of industry, sometimes those regulations can reduce profitability to lead to layoffs too. So it can cut both ways. Like you see this usually in the energy sector. So example, airline deregulation in the early 1980s. New, smaller, cheaper airlines emerged, but older, larger airlines are having trouble competing and had to cut back on flights, employees, and benefits. So as a result of that, the major airlines have become one of the most subsidized things in America. So, like, there's a lot of things that are around you might not think of, but they receive a lot of taxpayer dollars to stay open, like NFL stadiums, for example. Major airlines are another one. Yes, they're private entities, but they also receive a lot of government credits, in a sense, to stay open. All right, folks, that's going to end our lecture for today. Make sure you turn in that paper for me, all right? It's in the Google Classroom. Bye-bye. Yes, Sam. Absolutely.